My name is Neil Liddell, and I am a member of the grassroots organization Friends of Vermont Public Education. We are a Vermont nonprofit fighting for Vermont's public education system. Our mission is to ensure that public education funding in Vermont is distributed in accordance with our state and federal constitutions. We advocate for accountability and transparency, emphasizing that any school receiving public funds must fully comply with Vermont's public school rules and regulations. Our mission is to protect and promote equitable, high-quality public education for all Vermont students. With me today from the Friends Board of Directors is Gio Honeyford, Ken Fredette, that's the real Ken Fredette, and Greg Hughes. Through pandemics, floods, incredible chaos at the federal level, and demographic transition, our public schools are a source of safety, strength, and continuity for our children and our communities. Our public schools keep our children safe, give them the breadth of opportunity and experience to choose their own future, and they provide meals and mental health support when times are tough. Our public schools know that all means all, that every kid has a fair chance, every child deserves respect and dignity, and every student and family is part of the community. Our public schools are a commitment set out by Vermont's founding fathers and mothers in our Constitution that we must continue to uphold. It's one of the cornerstones of our democracy. Yet at this moment, our public schools and our communities are struggling. More than ever, we need strong, steady, competent leadership that can provide stability and guidance. Unfortunately, the governor's proposal is missing all of those key components. At this crucial time, when we desperately need real leadership, the governor has presented us with a proposal that feels like it's being developed in real time by outside consultants with little to no experience in Vermont, based on data that's not applicable to our brave little state. If there is good news, it's that it's not too late. As the governor and lawmakers work on education reform, there are some key things that they should keep in mind. Number one, affordability and accountability go hand in hand. Without oversight, taxpayer money can be used inefficiently, with little accountability for student well-being, student outcomes, or fiscal responsibility. Any schools receiving public money should follow the same rules. When there is no transparency, it becomes harder to control costs and ensure that money is being used effectively. Public money should come with public accountability. Second, expanding our voucher program moves Vermont in the wrong direction. In the wake of the Supreme Court's Carson v. Macon decision, the governor had an opportunity to shore up Vermont's public education system and limit the flow of dollars to religious schools. Instead, his proposal serves to protect private schools and potentially expand our state's current voucher program. Expanding vouchers while cutting $180 million from public schools does not save money. It creates more instability and weakens the public education for all students and could put us on a path for another lawsuit. Third, process matters. 8 months ago, the governor was convinced education reform was necessary. He had all that time to develop a proposal, refine it, and work out the details. Instead, nearly 2 months into the session, we've been presented with pieces of a proposal delivered in drips and drops. Only this week did full bill language finally appear. Instead of being upfront and transparent about their intentions, they've proposed piecemeal changes that make it harder for the public to understand the full impact. Finally, Vermonters deserve a smarter, fairer approach. A strong public education system is the best way to provide opportunity for all students while keeping costs predictable for taxpayers. The focus of any legislation should be on strengthening public schools, making education more affordable, and ensuring that public funds are used efficiently and transparently. The legislature has the ability to stand up for our Constitution and defend the democratic purpose of a public education. We call on lawmakers to ensure that our public education dollars are used for public education in schools that are open to all and that strive for the same shared purposes. I am very pleased to be joined today by three individuals who all strongly support our mission. Jessica Careless is an education consultant and former Vermont Agency of Education Division Director. Armando Villaseca was Vermont's first Secretary of Education and last Commissioner of Education, as well as a former superintendent and principal. And finally, Krista Hewling is a South Burlington High School social studies teacher and former chair of Vermont's State Board of Education. I'd like to invite each of them up to the podium to provide brief remarks, and we'll start with Jess.
Thanks, Neil, and thanks to everyone for being here and letting us speak with you. As Neil said, I'm Jessica Careless, Groton resident, and I have had the great privilege to be raised by a public school teacher and school board member, to attend Vermont Public Schools K-12, to work in, alongside, and for public schools, and most recently to serve Vermont Public Schools as a division director of 8 years at the Agency of Education. A job I left in August, and that I truly believed I would leave to first. And my husband asked me what that meant, so it means I thought I might die there, but because I loved it so much. Within my first year of joining the AOE, I developed a concern that grew over time that our public school system was being chipped away at, slowly but surely and with intention, by interests inside and outside of the state. Unfortunately, what the governor's plan signals is that what was once a growing concern is now a reality. Let me be clear. Public education is founded on the principle of public governance, not just public funding. The tension between local and state control is neither a new one, nor a problem that needs to be corrected as our new Secretary of Education has suggested. It is necessary. The issue is and has been that all of us, from elected officials to appointed officials, to education professionals, to Vermont taxpayers, as a system, must make the same commitment, follow the same set of rules, and follow through on our responsibilities to support a public good that each and every child and family in Vermont can rely on. It's a social compact, an agreement we've made that is enshrined in our Constitution, and that we pool our resources together to support. Unfortunately, the governor's plan and the Secretary's campaign signal that they don't share the same commitment, nor feel that the rules have to apply to everyone, nor understand that if this is truly a crisis, it is one that has been long in the making and can't be solved after a 6-month orientation period. I am concerned that our administration does not understand the fundamentals of sustained crisis management. We don't need bold ideas, we need good, complete ones. We don't need disruption, we need deliberate, data-informed decision-making. We don't need another relentless cascade of policy, we need effective implementation and evaluation over time. Under the guise of boldness, the governor and the secretary proposed taking a sledgehammer to our public education system, a system that we have leached resources from and then blamed for not offering enough, a system that has shown up for Vermont time and time again, but is dismissed by the governor as being middle of the pack. Under the guise of choice, the governor and the secretary proposed to put in place an ill-defined and frankly complicated lottery and statewide voucher system. Systems that in so many states, including Florida, have proven to 1, dramatically increase costs to taxpayers, 2, produce the same or worse academic outcomes, and 3, create ever-widening gaps between the privileged few and the rest of us. What kind of choice is that? Under the guise of transparency and collaboration, the governor and the secretary developed a plan in secret, without input from the very people who work in and benefit from the system that they propose to undo, and in parallel to a democratically and legislatively convened commission who would have been delighted to hear your thoughts. Collaboration isn't cliff notes from a contracted vendor, and transparency isn't using a powerful platform to engage in a big reveal that rivals Oprah. Finally, the governor and the secretary have elected to do a protracted rollout of an unfinished plan, finally culminating in a bill of language this week, at the expense of doing what our public schools and the children and families it serves need so desperately: leadership, support, and oversight. The Secretary has marshaled the resources of the AOE not to serve Vermonters, but to serve an unfinished plan. The secretary has convened sprint teams composed of people from the very public schools she says are understaffed and operationally inefficient in order to fill in the considerable holes in the plan, with the caveat that they don't have a say in whether the plan even has merit. And they are choosing to do this at a time when the fate of our federal Department of Education and the considerable resources it provides to the state is in flux, and disruption and confusion and DC balance. We don't need to replicate that kind of chaos here in this state at this moment, nor design in an information vacuum. That's inviting yet another disaster, this time one that's man-made. This year, we had students start school in tents. In the last 5 years, our public schools have made it through a global pandemic that, I'll remind you, officially ended in May of 2023, 2 major and multiple flooding events, 3 different secretaries of education, a change to the new statewide summative assessment system, and a relentless cascade of bills that require adjustment and implementation at the local level with insufficient and sometimes no support from the state. And as an example, in the 21-22 biennium, 84 bills were introduced and 37 acts were passed into the law that in some way, shape, or form affected education and how it's governed, administered, and or funded. And still, our kids show up, our educators and administrators show up, our school boards show up, our communities show up. Now it's time that we show up for them. Anyone with legitimate educational training and expertise knows that right now what our students, families, communities, and most importantly, our public schools need is stability, predictability, accountability, and the support to do the work the state has delegated to them. That's actually what the research says. And that's what our kids deserve. I believe deeply in good government. This plan isn't it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Armando Villaseca, and as mentioned, I was the last Commissioner of Education and the first Secretary of Education in Vermont. And it was a complicated time, even though I believe those were some terrible mistakes that we made. Providing, moving it from a state board, appointed Secretary or Commissioner, making the rules and managing that, to me, was a huge mistake. It was done, but then not much of a plan was put afterwards. Now, one of my concerns, getting off subject, is the concern that the agency is looking to take over rulemaking as well from the department. So if the agency takes over, that means that whatever input we have from around the state school board members who are elected geographically from appointed from around the state would lose that. So to me, amongst other things, I did want to mention that is an area that we all have to be aware of, so that does not occur. Because at that point, it's a closed house. Everything occurs within the walls of this building. Anyway, I just wanted to get that point out. Accountability is a big issue. Obviously, if you're spending my dollars, I want to know where those dollars are going. One of the problems with the plans and some of the concerns that I've had over the years with Vermont, even as a Secretary Commissioner, was some of the accountability issues with money going to schools that are out of state, out of the country. I remember as a principal of Westford Elementary School having to pay kids who were going to school in France because it was allowed. They didn't have a high school to go to. That to me just seemed odd. What accountability do we have? What accountability do the taxpayers have to know where that money is going? The same thing with some of the private schools of Vermont. You know, we have the academies. They do a good job. They follow the rules. It's when you start getting into some other places that my concern is the accountability. And if the governor's voucher program expands, that's even more of an issue of how do you control and how do you hold people accountable for making sure that schools are open to all kids, open to all faculty, whether I'm married or not, regardless of the situation, that I can work in those schools. So that accountability to me is a big issue. And again, talking about real on-the-ground issues for schools. Having been a teaching principal in a school of 44 kids, all the way to the principal of the largest high school in the state at Essex, I've seen quite a range. I've worked in 5 different counties, so I have an idea of what occurs in Franklin County, Windsor County, Lamoille County, where I actually currently live, and Chittenden County. Everybody there is looking for the same thing. They want accountability for their dollars, they want an efficient way of managing the schools, and they want kids who are being prepared for whatever they decide to do in the future. And again, diverting public dollars to private schools or expanding the voucher program would, in my estimation, be a step backwards in the direction for public education. We're not Florida, we're not California. We're a small state with small rural schools. Some of the proposals that have been put forth about 5 school boards around the school districts around the state, honestly, I've never heard of such a ridiculous thing. I'm not involved in education anymore. I can say pretty much what I want. When we were working for years, Richard Kate, Rebecca, myself, others have been working for years on trying to look at a model that would work for the state. And all kinds of issues been put out there. Is the county model the best one? Is whatever it is, we need to do something. But for years, and I remember this very distinctly when the governor, and who I like very much, was the lieutenant governor when the agency when the secretary's position was appointed, we were going through all of these discussions. He was never involved in them once. Not once did the lieutenant governor and the current governor at the time give his voice to anything going on in education. So now, all of a sudden, years pass without much coming out, and now we have these fairly radical ideas coming out of nowhere, which to me seems out of character for the governor over the years. So to me, those are the type of things that are very concerning, that are not, in my estimation, the best interests of the state. And again, there are many ways of strengthening public education, strengthening local voices, but I think, and I know people may say, we have to go slow. We've been going slow for the last 10 decades, but it really does seem like now something's going to happen. And we have to go slow and make sure that all voices are heard. The idea of some of the numbers that have been put out about class sizes, as again, a principle of many small rural schools, that would have shut our school down, or that would have at least altered the makeup of our school. And I think those are real serious questions that we have to consider, because we are a small rural state and we are spread out. If we were a large urban state, it would be a lot easier, but we're not. When you're looking at Windsor County, Wyndham County, Essex County, Caledonia County, it really is different than Chittenden, Washington, and some other counties when we look at what the future should look like around governance. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but those who know me, that's, sort of what I do. Right? But I also get to the point, and I do think that we have to be very careful with how we proceed forward. I find the work that the organization is doing is wonderful, and I hope that more and more people will be involved over the next few weeks and months to provide input to our legislators who will be making some of these decisions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello, my name is Krista Hewling, and I'm an experienced Vermont public school educator with 2 decades in the classroom. I'm a former chair of the Vermont State Board of Education, and I'm a mom. I'm here for vacation break. I'm deeply concerned about Governor Phil Scott's education plan. The proposal poses serious risk for Vermont's public school system and threatens the delicate balance between freedom and unity, core values that define our state. Vermont's motto, freedom and unity, captures the heart of our current education challenges. While we cherish individual freedom, taking it to extremes can damage our unity and shared resources. Public education remains one of our most vital shared assets, a system Vermonters have supported for generations. The governor's proposal includes several problematic elements, including mandated district mergers that ignore local community needs and wants, rigid staffing ratios that don't account for rural realities and best practices in the classroom, voucher programs that could drain public resources, and weakening the State Board of Education's oversight of removing rulemaking. Another concern to share with you. Speaking to all parents of Vermont, do you want your children in a classroom with 25 students minimum? I know that's not what I want for my daughter, who's entering 4th grade next year. If you feel the same, you must write to your legislator and the governor's office and tell them what you think of these ratios. And educators, do you want classrooms with a minimum of 25 students? I'm a teacher. I've taught classes of 25, 28, 30, and even a co-taught humanities class with English with 52 students in one room. Anyone who is looking at these ratios with the lens of trauma-informed teaching knows that they simply do not work. Our school systems are still dealing with the mental health and academic deficits caused by COVID. Now is not the time to starve the system of resources. students will not get the attention they need to succeed. Long gone are the days that students sit in rows and memorize regurgitated facts. Modern classrooms are shaped by standards that help students become critical thinkers and have the ability to make claims with evidence and reasoning. This kind of classroom is more labor intensive, but has a student at the center of learning. The numbers the governor proposes will save money at the cost of quality of education for our students. Is that a cost Vermonters are willing to pay? The proposed mandatory school district mergers and uniform staffing ratios fail to consider Vermont's unique community needs. While these challenges might appear cost-effective on paper, they overlook how local schools serve as vital community hubs in small towns. During Act 46 consolidation discussions, countless citizens testified about their school's crucial role as community centers. We heard hours of public testimony about this. Applying one-size-fits-all staffing formulas threatens to destabilize rural communities through potential school closures. While school closures, especially in upper grades, may be needed, it must be done in a more thoughtful way than just ratios. The governor's plan also expands school choice through vouchers, which presents a serious equity concern will undermine public education funding. Voucher programs would redirect taxpayer money away from public schools, which are required to serve all students, to private institutions that often lack transparency in their operations and their finances. Private schools can selectively choose their students through admission requirements and may not adequately serve children that don't fit their vision, which I was told at a public hearing once by an independent school. So this creates a two-tiered system where public schools must operate with reduced resources while still serving the most diverse and challenging student populations. Any educational institution that receives public funding should be required to maintain fair, inclusive policies that ensure equal access and appropriate services for all students, regardless of their background or circumstance. Beyond these immediate financial concerns, the proposed challenges also threaten educational oversight. Vermont must reestablish proper checks and balances between the governor's office and education policy to prevent political interference in making sound education policy. When I joined the state board shortly after the passage of Act 98, which had the governor switch from being commissioner, or had the commissioner to secretary, the agency still prioritized equity and quality, working with legislators on initiatives like Act 77. Can you imagine having those conversations today, talking about flexible pathways, student-centered learning? That's not the case. Today we focus on tax rates and school choice. So we need to return to emphasizing quality, equity, and excellence while developing a sustainable funding system. Public schools remain our last institution, one of Vermont's, our last institution serving the entire community for the public good. The mission is threatened by the governor's plan to overhaul and weaken the system. Irish lawmakers are standing with me today to oppose the governor's plan and find a funding system that will maintain the system's value at a price Vermonters can afford. While supervisory unions, not districts, may need to be made larger, the process must be thoughtful and done in open meeting, like the final plan was for Act 46, instead of behind closed doors or on the 5th floor. And lastly, I urge citizens to contact your representatives and oppose these damaging proposals. Our children deserve better than a diminished education system. Vermont's education future and our children's opportunities depend on the decisions we make today. So please take action. Thank you.
To help with questions, but I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the legislators that are standing with us today on this issue.
Our soda standing.
No pun intended. We greatly appreciate your support on this issue, and we know it's a challenge, but we know that you guys have got to do your work. So thank you so much.
All right, so I'm Gio Honeyford. I'm from Royalton. I'm a long-term school board member. I was a president of the VSBA for a bunch of years. A couple years ago, last year, a bunch of us got together and said somebody has to do something about the inequity in the funding system of private schools getting money and not playing by the same set of rules. And we said somebody's got to do it, finally figured out it's us. So within a year, we've built an organization, managed to get these people here, fundraising, we're doing something now. And before I turn it over to questions, I have a statement that I'd like to make, because we got to clear this up. The governor's office has been pretty vociferous about saying we don't have a voucher system in the state. So I got the Merriam-Webster dictionary, looked up voucher, second definition, says a coupon issued by government to a parent or guardian to be used to fund a child's education. So it's too late to set up a voucher system, we already have it. So with that, do we have any questions?
What do you make of the fact that in the governor's proposal, only schools that currently enroll more than 50% publicly tuition students would be allowed to still receive public tuition? It sounds like, from my understanding, this would reduce the number of private schools getting public money to only 7, 8, 9, something like that. So you cut out all the religious schools. Is that a step in the right direction in your belief?
Neil's dying to answer this one.
Hoping this-
Neil, come on up.
It's an interesting aspect of the proposal. If you take a look at the Carson-Macon decision, we think the outline was pretty clear. States don't need to offer a voucher program, but if they do, they cannot exclude public dollars going to religious schools. I can only assume that the governor and Secretary Saunders and all of their legal team thoroughly vetted the proposal that's been put in that bill to assure the state that we are not going to run afoul of any potential lawsuits in this area. So I have to be confident at this point in time that they've done their due diligence and that they know that what they're putting on the table is going to satisfy the Carson-Macon decision.
The other part I'll say about that is, if you look at the governor's proposal, it's still not an equal playing field. Just because we're narrowing the playing field down to 4 schools does not make it an equal playing field. Those 4 schools are still playing by a different set of rules. So even that doesn't meet what we need to have.
May I add a observation? I think also, to clarify, when they're talking about percent of the population, they're still not holding them to the class size expectations. So if 51% of 50-student school is publicly funded, then they would receive public funds. But a 15-student school that's a public school would most likely be on the track.
What's wrong with religious schools getting public funding?
Greg.
We do have a compelled support clause in the state, which basically says the government cannot force its citizens through taxation to support religious organizations that they don't believe in. We've had it for 250 years. That's what's wrong with it.
So, Trump administration right now is threatening to cut off federal funding from Maine because Maine is supporting transgender students born biologically male playing in girls' sports. Hasn't done that to Vermont yet, but I think we have that situation happening here. What should the state do?
Well, transgender people are a protected class in Vermont. So what we should do is continue to protect them.
Even if it means we're losing a ton of federal money.
I'm not going to be the one who's making that decision by myself, but I think it's important enough. You have to put your foot down somewhere. This is about human rights.
Just, can you speak to the extent to which the AOE is reliant on federal funding?
Yeah, I would just direct you to your budget. But I would say that this state has certainly staffed its agency in more areas using federal funds predominantly in big things that would determine quality, like assessment and instruction. So, if you want the most recent numbers, I would go to the budget.
Any other questions? Well, we'll be around if you want to speak to us privately. We'd be happy to do it. Thanks for coming.